Reports of massacres by Sudan's Rapid Support Forces in Darfur after the army was pushed out of the region. Tens of thousands of civilians are now feared trapped in el-Fasher. The conflict in Sudan has caused one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. So what can be done to stop the bloodshed? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. Even by the shocking standards of Sudan's fighting in the past 2.5 years, reports from North Darfur state suggest new levels of brutality in the last few days. Some accounts say at least 2,000 people have been killed, among them children and hundreds of hospital patients in their beds. The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces are being blamed after seizing the last army stronghold in the region on Sunday. Now, while international focus has been elsewhere, the conflict in Sudan has created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The UN says 25 million people, around half the population, face extreme levels of hunger. A quarter of the population have been forced from their homes. And despite repeated warnings from the world body and humanitarian agencies, the violence goes on, with allegations of foreign support fueling the fighting. So, what hope is there for the people of Sudan? Can the latest reports of even worse atrocities help bring foreign pressure to end the conflict? We'll speak to our guest shortly, but first let's have this report from Alex Baird.
Hospital patients killed where they thought they'd be safe. These are the latest images of the reported massacre carried out by Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces at the Saudi maternity hospital in el-Fasher. More than 460 people are believed to have been killed. It's just one of the many reported mass killings carried out in North Darfur's capital after it was seized by the RSF from Sudan's army on Sunday following a 17-month siege. At least 170,000 people are still trapped in the city. Tens of thousands have managed to escape, most of them on foot.
There was a lot of shelling. Shelling killed my daughter, injured my other daughter's eye, and paralysed my son. I was hit by shelling. My body is full of wounds and is swollen.
Shelling and drone attacks were happening all the time. They hit us with the backs of their rifles day and night unless we hid in the houses. At 3 a.m, we snuck out of the houses till we arrived at Hilat al-Sheth, where we were robbed. They left us with nothing. I came here barefoot. Even my shoes were taken.
The RSF is now accused of killing thousands of people across the city. The scale of the reported atrocities is so bad that the leader of the RSF, Hamdan Dagalo, has been forced to respond.
There were violations in el-Fasher. From here, we announced the formation of an inquiry committee. These are not merely words. Our legal committees have arrived in el-Fasher.
The latest gains by the Rapid Support Forces means the paramilitary group now controls more than 1/3 of the country. The conflict began in 2023 after a disagreement on how to integrate RSF forces into the Sudanese army. More than 2 years later, Sudan is facing a dire humanitarian crisis. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, while millions more suffer, a human cost which, after the reports from el-Fasher, is growing by the minute. Alex Baird, Jazeera for Inside Story.
All right, time to talk to our guests. In Nairobi, we have Hamid Khalafallah, a researcher and a policy analyst who specialises in governance and development in Sudan. In Geneva, Bakry Eljack, he's a professor of public policy at Long Island University, Brooklyn, and a Sudan analyst. And also in Nairobi in Kenya, Justin Lynch, who's managing director of the Conflict Insights Group, which monitors and analyses the conflict in Sudan. A very warm welcome to you all. Hamid, I'd like to start with you. First of all, if I may, house-to-house raids, summary executions, hospital killings, civilians attacked in mosques, civilians killed as they flee, sexual violence, bodies littering the city. The horror would be unimaginable, wouldn't it, if we hadn't seen it all before?
Absolutely. We have seen it all before, although what we are seeing today coming out of el-Fasher ever since Sunday morning is horrific beyond words. It's unimaginable. It's something that we have not seen, documented lately, to be able to see pools of blood on the streets of el-Fasher in front of homes from space through satellite imagery is something, just horrific. But as you said, we have seen this before. Not only we have seen it before, we knew this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen because we saw the same pattern and of atrocities take place in El Geneina in 2023. A genocide, mass killing, ethnic cleansing. We saw the same. It's systematic. It was the Rapid Support Forces were always going to do the minute they took over al-Fasher. And we've warned against this for months and months. Al-Fasher was besieged for over 500 days, but the world chose to watch and to do nothing, and to come out today and condemn the RSF for what they're doing. Meanwhile, we knew this was going to happen.
All right, well, we'll get into what the world should be doing about this. Bakry, do you agree with that? We knew this was going to happen. And do we now know what is going to happen? Is this just a kind of a macabre preview of what's to come in other areas of Darfur and North Kordofan as RSF forces move to the east?
Thank you, Nick. Greetings to you and your guest from Nairobi. I think let me share the feelings with my friend Hamid. This is really horrific. It is shocking. Lots of Sudanese people are beyond words and nobody knows even how to feel or what to think. But reality is this is not by any means surprising. We have seen this happen in, as Hamid mentioned, in Geneina. We have seen it in Jazeera. RSF has been out of control. They have been told multiple times that they need to control their soldiers, but I think for anyone to be surprised about this should be goes without saying. But reality is, if we don't do something about this now, this is not going to end in el-Fasher. It will expand to North Kordofan, and likely the war might actually reach some other part of the country. And there is no guarantees what we see in el-Fasher now would not be repeated somewhere else. So I think, as painful as this may be, this is a call for the international actors, for Sudanese actors, that we have to do everything we can to find a way to get ceasefire. That should be the priority to address all these massacres and what could happen. But also, I think international community and actors should talk to us RSF leaders, and they have to instruct them. They have to protect civilians until we get to ceasefire. We cannot sit idly and just cry. We have to do something, and there are something that could be done. I don't think there is no tools for diplomacy and for pressure to be used. I believe there is, and I think it can be used. And I'm sure some actors are thinking about what can be done.
Okay, we'll look at those tools shortly, as I say. Justin, what are your thoughts? The thing is, both parties here view this, don't they, as through a zero-sum lens, that the victory of one is entirely dependent on the defeat of the other.
Absolutely. I was speaking with diplomats in Washington recently, and what's very sad about the situation is that there was peace talks that was happening just this past weekend, and on Friday we were hopeful that there was going to be a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire that was going to be the first time that there was going to be a peace in Sudan since the war started in April 2023. And we saw how that hope obviously came to such a kind of tragedy. And I think that where those negotiations stand right now, of course, is it's in rubble. And one of the reasons why is because both sides think that they can win, right? And both sides have proven such stubborn negotiators. And I think that it's really important to understand that both sides are backed by foreign powers, particularly the Rapid Support Forces. They have support from the United Arab Emirates. And I think that as we look at options for how to try and solve what's happening in el-Fasher and across Sudan, it's really pressure on these foreign powers that has been, the task that the international community has struggled with.
Okay, Hamid, what about this involvement by countries outside of Sudan and the support for respective sides by different nations, and the RSF being supported reportedly by the UAE, which UAE, of course, deny, and the Saudis supporting their opponents, the Sudanese armed forces. Why is there this direct outside involvement for each side, and particularly in the first instance, UAE for the RSF?
So the war in Sudan has a lot of reasons that are locally grounded in the Sudanese political economy and so on. But there's, a lot of international fueling that is also trying to make use of these local dynamics. The war would not have continued this long had there not been continuous, sustained, persistent, direct support to both belligerents. But as we speak about el-Fasher today, I think as people, condemn what the RSF are doing, the RSF did not just magically get these arms. They did not grow them out of the land in Darfur. They got them through international actors, particularly the United Arab Emirates. Everything they got from other countries was also facilitated by the United Arab Emirates. So the responsibility of this is not only on the Rapid Support Forces, it's on the United Arab Emirates and also the other countries that continue to refuse to hold the United Arab Emirates to account. Just a couple of days ago, there was a report of UK-made weapons being used in Darfur by the Rapid Support Forces, obviously facilitated through the United Arab Emirates. We've seen similar reports about European countries and so on and so forth. So the responsibility of this is largely on the United Arab Emirates, and they should be held to account for how they're supporting and fueling the Rapid Support Forces and the war in Sudan.
So, Bakry, I guess my question is, why would the UAE be supporting one side, the RSF? What is the interest here? Is it a question of resources within Sudan?
I think Hamid kind of started to speak a little bit about the complexity of Sudanese, crisis. This is not something new. UAE has been completely holding Sudanese economy under control. This is something done by Bashir during the time of the sanctions. Both, actually, as a matter of fact, even if you want to go into digging into details, what's so-called Sudan Industrial Complex or system, which is the holding company that runs all the businesses for the army. All their money and their businesses have been located in Dubai and in UAE. And the same thing for Rapid Support Forces. So the reality is that has something to do with the operations in Yemen that is Sudan participated in. That's the beginning of how Rapid Support Forces found access to Saudi Arabia, to UAE. And that was sanctioned by the state. At that time, Bashir regime and Sudanese state itself. So there is a deep history of complexity to those relationships. But also, Sudan is not new to war. We also have to admit Sudanese state has been engulfed in war since 1955, even before UAE was even a country on the map. Reality is the combination of geopolitical reconfiguration of the region, competition for resources, which is a real fact. We know that there is a plan for, UAE has a plan for issues about food, access to food, to land. There is not just for Sudan, the entire West Africa. And this is going to be a very complicated issue if the world did not find a new way of dealing with such kind of conflicts, because they keep to be coming back. We have seen it in Central African Republic. We have seen it almost started in Chad. And now Sudan is completely engulfed in war. There is a chance that's going to go into West Africa. So there are competition for resources. This is one factor, but there are also internal factors. And this is not just a matter of UAE and the region. Also, there is a global competition for access, for influence. And I think you could even link this to what's going on in terms of the new world order. This is not the same world that we have in the 1980s, not the same world that we have even 10 years ago. So Sudan happened to be really dealing with this horrific war and atrocities and difficult times when everything is shifting around us. And I think the focus has to be always how do we put pressure on the external actors to stop fueling the war. Also, we have to put pressure on Sudanese actors to stop fighting, because civilians are the one who's paying the price for this right now.
All right, so the resources are there, gold, copper, oil, agriculture is very rich, the River Nile running right through. Justin, the geopolitics of the location of Sudan and its proximity to the Red Sea and, of course, the Middle East, all a big factor in the international effect of this war. Yeah,
I think that Sudan sits on the Red Sea, which is right near the Suez Canal. But I think that, let's not overcomplicate this, what's going on. I speak with a lot of diplomats who speak with Sheikh Mansour, Sheikh Taknoun, and the Emirati leadership about Sudan. And the honest truth is that the Emiratis don't have a strategy for what's going on in Sudan, much like they don't have a strategy for what was going on in Libya, much like they don't have a strategy for what happened in Yemen. Right? This is another failed policy of the Emiratis, and they don't really know what they're doing in Sudan. And so their aims for what they were trying to do in Sudan haven't worked. And so what we need to do is to try and convince the Emiratis that their own interests aren't being served by what's happening. It's a shame that they've continued this policy, which, the kind of consequence of it, we're seeing in el-Fasher right now, right? And I think that they do hold legal responsibility for continuing to arm the Rapid Support Forces. What I do in my day job is track weapons flows, and it's not very difficult to track the airplanes that come in Libya and to track arms flows. These planes come in almost every day to a nearby airfield, and you can track these. And it's not hard to track their movements using satellite imagery and other advanced technology that you can use. And so, international bodies are obviously tracking this, governments are tracking this. It's not very difficult. And I think that what, the whole world is kind of waiting for is that, we all have this evidence, but the Emiratis continue to deny it. And it's just kind of a strange situation. And I think that, if the UAE wants to be taken seriously on the world stage as a real, diplomatic player, it's time to I think have a real solution and kind of be upfront about their policies in Sudan, even behind closed doors, which they're not.
The UAE, of course, still deny any involvement in Sudan. Bakry, so given the nature of this appalling slaughter and the fact that international pressure has failed to change the situation on the ground, why is it that there has been no movement in diplomacy? Are the international efforts enough? Is it just lip service?
Well, I think this is a question that is, you could say, even $1 million question. Or it is because everybody talks about it, but nothing seems to be happening in terms of shifting the situation or trying to improve it. There are lots of words and condemnation and feeling sorry, and we have seen a statement from the AU, African Union Peace and Security. We have seen a statement from Secretary General. There is the House of Commons in the UK is talking about Sudan right now. In a few hours, the UN Security Council will be talking about Sudan. The problem is all of this is going to end up just a conversation in the ether. They need actions. What I really hope, and I know just alluded to the fact that the talks failed in Washington, what I know now is there is still negotiation, and I have some information that there might be some hope for getting to a ceasefire. I don't know if that's going to be successful or not, but we know both sides still have a delegation in Washington, and there is indirect talks. So we hope if there is enough pressure from the US, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, and that's a dilemma of Sudan. The countries that involved the most in Sudan are the countries now mediating in Sudan. Usually, we know from diplomacy, the best mediator is the one who has an interest, but not to be involved that deep. However, this is a reality of what we have. We have the statement from Quad, and I think if there is any hope to get to a ceasefire, and for diplomacy to work, is to actually use what we have on the table right now. There is a proposal on the table for a humanitarian truce, and I think we should do everything diplomatically, through media, through mobilization, to push for a ceasefire. I think we can continue to talk about blaming external actors as long as we can, and there is a way to do this, but we have to do something to save lives as we speak. That should be the priority, and then we need to continue the diplomacy. We need to use all the legal venues. We can use regional and international organizations to hold UAE accountable, to hold other countries also supporting different groups. My final point is, even if we stop the UAE, if there is still conflict, these guys are going to find someone to find them weapons, and they have resources. Both of them control the goals of the country. We know how much that could be.
Do you think that all routes lead on this to the Trump administration? Ultimately, it's up to Donald Trump to apply the pressure that's required to to bring this to an end? And could the moment be now, given the images we've seen of the atrocities that have been taking place on the ground, through a clear humanitarian need for action to bring peace?
Yes, I mean, there is an important role that the U.S. administration has been playing and should continue to play, particularly given that they are the ones who have, the most leverage in this game, if you will. They have very strong relations with the United Arab Emirates and also with Egypt. The ones who are backing both sides the most. So that leverage is quite important, and it has to be utilized and so on. But I think it's a very dangerous game if we leave it all to the U.S. We've seen how the new way of peace deals that are being made by the U.S., whether it was in DRC or in Gaza, and how it really, everything what you get is a ceasefire, and it's not necessarily a really genuine deal, and it's all about resources, and it's more of a business deal rather than a peace deal. So leaving this to the U.S. On its own is quite problematic, and that's why we need a broader mediation team that includes the U.S. and utilizes the leverage that the U.S. provides and so on, but also ensures that this is a genuine peace process that addresses the root causes of the war in Sudan and so on, and does not reward belligerents for their violence, and ensures that this peace process kind of takes us into sustainable peace and to a democratic transition, and that requires an important role to be played by Sudanese civilians in such processes, something that the current U.S. administration is not able or willing to offer.
That's the thing, isn't it, Justin? The U.S. administration tends not to be, the current one tends not to be guided by humanitarian principles alone. We've discussed briefly the myriad riches of Sudan. Why are they not enough to encourage Trump to step in and add the pressure, the momentum that's needed to create the kind of scenario that our guests are talking about?
It's not just the Trump administration. Even the Biden administration, was not willing to apply the pressure on the UAE. And it's not just the US, it's the UK, it's the EU. And the reason is very simple. It's because the UAE spends a lot of money in the West, right? The UAE owns Manchester City. They have a lot of financial investments across the world. The 2004 rise in the stock market was largely, because of investments from these Gulf nations, right, in the AI boom. And so they spend a lot of money, and we can see how when something like Sudan comes up on the agenda, it's not very high compared to other issues like finance, like Israel. And we see the consequences of that, right? Everybody on this panel and everybody who's been following Sudan has been warning that this is going to happen for many, many years. And we finally seen this day come. The consequences of this will be seen for decades, right? We will see instability and really the kind of partition of Sudan into two de facto states.
Well, it is de facto partitioned already, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. One that is controlled by the RSF and then one that is controlled by SAF. And this will continue for decades. And so I think that, while there is this short-term disincentive that diplomats face, we struggle to get them to recognize that, you're kind of, creating this long-term instability that has tremendous consequences.
Yeah. So, Bakry, how do we find this elusive solution to a ceasefire that's agreeable to two sides, two warring factions that are seemingly intent on carrying on until one destroys the other?
I think, of course, if you want to really approach this from a mediation point of view, you can't have ceasefire if two sides don't believe that there is no way to win the war outright. So that's a basic assumption. However, sometimes when people are fighting, they might get completely entrenched in their narratives about what they think is right, and they don't think about what is going to happen in terms of the likelihood. As we speak, I think I am not really over-optimistic, but I am realistic. What we have in our hand is a Quad statement, and Quad statement seems to have a roadmap. Yes, it is not
just to be clear, the Quad that you talk about is that's the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United States, right?
Yes, absolutely, and it has a very specific plan. There is a call for a ceasefire for 3 months, and then there is a political process that should take 9 months, and eventually the idea is to end the fighting. And I think to wait for another diplomatic effort to start somewhere is going to take time. I think what we have is just 4 countries, and I think the US could push a little bit more. And there are many tools available to Trump administration. And from what I know, there have been some pressures that's being mounted on both sides to accept a ceasefire deal. In the beginning, we know it failed because SAF refused. Right now, we had some conversations about that. RSF is now refusing. But as far as I know, this is doable. This is not completely like out of reach conflict. There have been more difficult conflict in the world before, and there have been solutions. So I think if we believe that the international actors, and specifically those 4 countries right now, because they have connections to both sides, if they really want to push hard, I think they can get to a ceasefire. I'm not talking about the stability of the country in 10 years.
Hamid, I'm just going to jump in there because we're just running out of time, and I do want to bring Bakry, I beg your pardon. I do want to bring Hamid in for the final word. Hamid, if we don't have a ceasefire, briefly, we've got a minute or so left. What are the implications, not only for Sudan, but for the region, for the Horn of Africa and the Sahel and so forth?
Horrible implications. The war is expanding and it's moving, it's spilling over into other countries, and that will continue to happen. And then, the borders between the 2 de facto states, if you will, the part that's under the SAF control and the Rapid Support Forces control, is going to continue to be contested, and that will continue to lead to more suffering and killing of people caught in the crossfire. However, I think as we wait for a ceasefire and so on, there's a lot that can be done that has not been done, particularly with regards to protection of civilians. There's so many options that have not been explored, particularly with regards to providing humanitarian assistance. So a ceasefire is very important to kind of stop the violence and to stop the killing of the people and so on. But there's a lot that can be done and that has not been done by the international community.
All right, we'll keep a close eye on how things develop. Gents, thanks for your time. Thanks to Hamid Khalafallah, Justin Lynch and Bakry Eljack. Thanks very much indeed. And thank you too for watching. You can follow this story, of course, on our screens and on our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, just go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Nick Clark, and the entire team here in Doha, it's goodbye for now.